Good afternoon, and thank you very much to the committee for inviting me here today. I do feel so almost slightly intimidated to be amongst a group of people who are so expert in information technology and service provision. And so what I thought I'd do was explain to you where I see, or my thoughts, give you some personal thoughts on where I see the role of IT shaping the future of higher education. And in that I include teaching and learning, research, internationalization and other aspects of the journey. I just thought I'd put up that picture because I noticed the conference theme was "Who do we think we are?" So I thought I'd tell you who I am. I graduated from Trinity College Dublin as a veterinary surgeon, and I worked in practice for some time, and then I moved into academia. I travelled around the UK mostly, actually, also spent some time in Germany, and took up my first lecturing post in the University of Glasgow in the vet school. I moved into management as Dean of the Vet School and then into be the Vice Principal and Senior Vice Principal, and I moved to Edinburgh Napier University about 18 months ago and have had a wonderful experience to date at that university. This is the outline of my talk. I thought I would just spend some time on the context we face and the current challenges. And strategy as an anchor, and David, who is here, will know that I'm passionate about strategy, getting it right, well, getting an agreed strategy around a shared vision, and then that is the tool for decision making. Because I see my role in the organisation as getting that shared vision, setting the strategy, and then trying to support people, encourage, motivate, enable them to deliver against those goals. I'll talk a little bit about the role of IC, the potential for information technology and services, and I just picked out 4 areas around student success, which is dear to all our hearts, perhaps a little bit around learning and research, around internationalization, because we're thinking hard about that at the moment as a university, because we teach 5,000 students overseas, based overseas, and how we can make that more efficient and while improving the quality of their experience, and perhaps reflect a little on organisational development. I was very struck when I first came to Napier, and I wanted effective and efficient and engaging ways of meeting the staff, of discussing our strategy, of getting shared views, how much I relied on my colleagues in information services to support that, with web streaming of conversations, with text walls around our presentations. And so I thought I'd just mention a bit about the role it can play in robust organisational development. And finally, I thought I'd just mention briefly something on staff engagement, because of course the key to delivering anything is to get the bulk of the staff on your side once you've opened up the opportunities and the potential to them. In terms of the context, while we always tend to focus on the problems and the issues and the challenges we have and the funding crisis, I always ground myself thinking, well, we're very lucky to be in a sector that is actually growing worldwide. Recent estimates are that there will be, over the next 10 to 12 years, there will be another demand for another 50 million places in higher education. And okay, you justifiably say, well, they're not going to be here, but the reach and the brand of UK institutions is so strong that I believe we can play a part in delivering higher education in other parts of the world. So we're lucky to be in a growth sector worldwide. I come from Scotland, where I have worked for many years, and within the UK we see clear divergence in policy, and that can be a challenge, it can be an opportunity, but the way our system is funded in Scotland is very different to the UK. We're very small in the sense that it's 19 institutions, we can all get around a table, we can discuss, we can have very close relationships with our politicians. There is a downside to that too, in being very close. When you're part of 160 or 170 institutions in England, it can be very different. I think something we forget about is the demographic. is that the demographic of our, certainly in Scotland, less of an issue in England in the future, is of a reducing school population, which will probably rise again, certainly in Scotland, as a consequence of migration. But in other parts of the world, of course, a very, very much rising young population. We're aware of all the new providers and the new models of provision of education. So we have our private providers coming in to England. We have them growing in reputation and certainly in reach in other parts of the world. And along, we've always thought about student mobility, because we try to recruit many students into our institutions, and we're always on the search for talented staff wherever they may be all over the world. But over the last 5 or 10 years, we've seen institution mobility alongside program mobility. So many universities thinking of setting up campuses outside their jurisdiction, as it were, their natural home. Internationalization with the global connectedness and the way we do our business has really impacted on universities. And of course, technological developments have changed the way we do things. And I was struck by that this year is the 25th year since the World Wide Web was invented, if you like, by Tim Berners-Lee. And from as a non-expert, when I look back over those 25 years and see the way the industries have been completely disrupted, new industries formed, I think it's been quite phenomenal. And I do actually ask myself, how come we haven't been disrupted quite as much as some institutions, some industries, because you would have thought we might be. So at the moment, what has all this enabled? Well, we've got MOOCs on our doorstep, we've got big data, which we can see the phenomenal potential for research, for good policy making. We've shared the potential of shared services, cloud services, we've issues around cybercrime and cybersecurity. And I think we also have that digital gap, as it were, in our capabilities of many of us, or maybe not our capabilities, but our skill set for many of us who are teaching and researching in universities in our 40s and 50s, and those with these new students who are coming in to our universities. And my own personal view is that although academics in universities have been hugely involved in developing a lot of new digital technology, I don't see major disruption having happened yet, but I kind of feel it's around the corner, and everybody tells me it's around the corner. So, and yet I see many of us still working with similar models to the models we've had for many years, and gentle change happening. And I suspect that's about to change, but I'm not quite sure how. So that policy context, or those contexts that we work in, I think leave us with a lot of challenges. Because of the international dimension and the mobility of people, I think competition is enormous now. Perhaps it was ever thus. Perhaps every age they say competition is increasing, but it does feel to be a highly, highly competitive environment in terms of research, in terms of students, in terms of funding. And funding is an issue for us all in the UK, whichever area of the UK you're operating in. Funding is challenging because of the financial crisis and the economic conditions of the last few years. Research concentration, you may believe in it, or you may think there are pluses and minuses to this, but it is an issue across for many universities, with the concentration of the majority of the research funding into a small number of universities. The evidence suggests that you get good research outputs when you have large groups of people working in teams. Equally, research drives a lot of the brand and reputation of a university, and particularly on the international stage, where it makes up 60 to 70% of the Times Higher World Ranking kind of criteria. And that has an impact on others. So widening access, a real challenge for the UK. It is still a real tragedy that so many people from the disadvantaged communities, lower socioeconomic classes, or if you like, the deprived areas, are still underrepresented in access to universities. adults that have been potentially in care, maybe 1 to 3% of them accessing higher education. That is something that we have to change. Graduate employability is a significant issue on students' minds and parents' minds. Certainly we've done some market research very recently around with groups of students, international, English, Scottish, Welsh, Northern Ireland, and employability is top of their things that they want to know about an institution. Will I get a job afterwards? Will I be well prepared for a job? And will that lead me into a successful career? I think student expectations have changed a lot, and perhaps not working in England, maybe they have changed more. I'd be interested to hear in terms of having to actually, the tuition fee having been brought in. I saw this very much when I was Dean of the Vet School, and in 1999 we went for and got accreditation for our American, to be part of the American, effectively the American UCAS system for veterinary schools. And so we suddenly had a very large influx of American students. And given that the amount of money they had borrowed to come and study in Scotland and be there, they were also a lot more mature because it's a second degree when you're in the States, the veterinary degree. And their expectations were completely in a different place from those of our home-based Scottish students. They expected us to teach till 5 o'clock if the class was scheduled till 5 o'clock. And they expected us to be there to answer their questions. Things that we take probably for granted now. But at that time, it was quite a shift for all the staff to come to terms with this. And rightly so, in my view. They had those expectations of what their experience would be with us. And that's a real challenge for an organisation like my own, where we have a very diverse student population. We have students who are studying in Hong Kong, India, Sri Lanka, Singapore. We have 40% of our students are mature. So we have a very large nursing school where we have people returning into education with childcare, with people coming from college, and we have people coming from school. And they all have different needs, and they all have different expectations, and that is a huge challenge for us. Brand and reputation, I think I mentioned alongside the research concentration. Any of you who travel, and it's not just abroad, but it's also around the UK, is where do you sit in league tables, where are you ranked, what is your brand? And the challenges posed to us by ICT, I think, are enormous, as well as the opportunities. Something I wanted to just focus on was that about the graduates and the way we're teaching over the way we have to adapt, I think, is our graduates that we're teaching, our students that we're teaching now to become graduates in the next few years, very much is about developing students to acquire a set of attributes which is beyond knowledge and understanding. So knowledge can be very temporary in many of our academic disciplines. What students need to be able to do is to access data, particularly everybody can access data anymore, most data, but able to access it, able to mine it, able to interpret it, able to synthesize it, able to analyze it, able to make decisions when they don't have good data, because that's what working is all about. We never have that complete, perfect picture of information we'd like when we make decisions. And I'm very struck by the fact that when I graduated, there was no such thing in universities as intellectual property law. There was no such thing as nanotechnology. And those jobs have all, and disciplines even within universities, have appeared since I graduated in 1980. And so we're preparing these people for jobs that don't exist, to use technologies that are not yet invented, and to work in a really, really connected environment. And I'm very struck by Peter Scott's comment in one of the articles he wrote. He used to be Vice-Chancellor at Kingston University. And we talk about that with our staff around the learning environment we want for our students. He said, we're all researchers now. We all have access to information, and that's the kind of environment we want and attributes we want for our graduates. I think within the staff of universities, I have worked in quite a few universities, and I can honestly, hand on heart, say that the vast majority of staff are totally committed to their students and passionate about their students and wanting success for them. Okay, maybe not everybody, but the vast majority. And also they're committed frequently to research, and I use that in its broadest term. It might be the research, it might be advancing your professional practice if you're a nurse or a vet or a medic. It might be particle physics, it might be philosophy, but they are passionate advancing their discipline, the academic staff. In terms of all the data would suggest that staff are increasingly bothered by the workloads, which they believe and would appear to me to have grown significantly over the last probably 10 to 15 years. And that's a real challenge for us as we try to make our environments great places to work and to have a good, healthy work-life balance. For academic staff, there is this impression that research, and probably validly so, is more greatly rewarded than teaching. And now, given our greater expectations from students, how do we reward, motivate, recognize staff for taking time around their teaching and around supporting their students? Technologies, maybe I'm not typical, but I see a lot of my colleagues who struggle with the new technologies, who struggle to get familiar with all the social media, how we might use them to improve the experience for our students and to improve research. And I think that is a huge issue across the sector. Managerialism, dare I say it, but it is oft quoted that that community, collegiate, nostalgic view of what it was like before has been replaced by a managerial culture, which I suppose I don't agree with, in the sense that I think we all have to live by a framework which is guiding our university, and that is the strategy of the university. And as long as we've all signed up to it, or most of us, shared it, agreed it, debated it, had our arguments, then agreed it, that's the way we move forward. Talent attraction is a significant issue to get the right people for your organisation into your university. And I think the innovation agenda, I put that up because it's something that is certainly really on government minds. And certainly, I was just at a meeting last night, it's very strong in Scotland, it's strong in England too, when you see the amount of resource being put into catapult centres and things like that. It's about, we have this wonderful university system, it's very highly regarded around the world. We do very well in terms of research outputs, in terms of spin-outs, in terms of engagements with business. But how can we use that vast resource even more effectively to get innovation into our business community and into industry, and thus contributing to economic growth for the whole of the UK? So in this environment, what I believe any organisation needs, whether you're in a university or what characterises it, I suppose, rapidly changing, lots of unknowns, an awful lot of stuff that we can't do anything about within an institution. But in that environment, we need clarity of vision, what it is we believe we are, who we think we are, an agreed plan, engaged people, and committed leadership. And when we have that encouragement, which would be around our strategy in the case of Edinburgh Napier, we then are trying to create a culture of reflection and evaluation. So it's not about just monitoring numbers and targets, it's about reflecting on what we've done, how we've done it. We use metrics, we use data, we use business intelligence to tell us how we do. But they are numbers, they should really be a reflective process. Accountability of staff in key positions, I think, is really important, so people know what they are responsible for and they are held to account for delivering that. Energy and enthusiasm. I think something that I have come across often, in some organisations is we have in Edinburgh Napier a real expectation that what we're going to do, we're going to succeed. But what's really important is to make sure we have a culture where there's room for failure, so then we'll know what doesn't work, and staff will feel motivated to deliver. This is just a summary of our, I don't expect you to read it, it's just our strategy on a page for Edinburgh Napier University. It's built on a set of values about who we believe we are as a university: professional, ambitious, innovative, inclusive. We're a broad-based university. We have about 18,000 students, heavily orientated to vocational type of courses, with professional practice very strong as a research theme, a lot of our research being applied research. We do some very good research in those applied areas. Our vision is of an enterprising and innovative community renowned internationally with an unrivaled student learning experience. And we have 4 key themes about building our academic reputation, delivering an excellent personalised student experience, growing innovation, enterprise and citizenship, and internationalising our work. And you might say, well, that could be several other universities. Bits of it are my university, bits of it are somebody else's. And naturally, there's going to be quite a lot of overlap at the high level. But how we interpret those is very much with an Edinburgh Napier flavour. So our enterprise theme, we are very, very good in student enterprise, student startups, student consultancies, social enterprise is a stream we're bringing in, and not many people really have understood that about us. So we're interpreting that with a range of partners, building new partnerships to support that. So how you interpret and bring to life those key themes is probably quite unique for everybody in this everybody in different universities. So within that context and that set around a strategy, where do I see the role of information technology and services, and where can it enable delivery to help us deliver our strategic objectives? And I thought I'd just focus on 4 areas, or touch on 4 areas. One around student success, one around learning and research, internationalization and organizational design and development. Now, in terms of student success, most people when they talk about students, they talk about the student experience. But for me, really, it's about success for students. It's about them achieving what they expected to achieve and going out and getting good jobs. And looking back on their time in university and saying, that was a really worthwhile experience. I learned a lot, I developed, and I have the skills that will fit me well in the future. I mentioned about the changing student expectations. Students, I believe, have much higher expectations than they had previously, and frankly, I believe that's a very good thing. And when I meet with my Students' Association, I work on the basis that the more they are demanding of me and of our staff, the better will be the quality of the experience ultimately, provided we're working in a truly positive partnership and that we are working together to achieve those aims. So I think changing student expectations is good for the university sector. Diverse communities, this whole notion of personalisation, and we have it in one of our strategic objectives because it is something the students feel so strongly about. And it makes it harder to personalise when you've got lots of diverse communities. But it is something that many of our students, as you will know, are accustomed to outside of their university lives, and that's what they expect when they come into us. Employability, I mentioned, is something that's really important to them, how they can access knowledge in the most amazing ways at any time, any place. And something that has been to the fore in Scotland for a long time, and increasingly so in the rest of the UK, is the recognition within institutions of the importance of the student voice. It links perhaps to changing student expectations. It probably links to the fact that now certainly in England, with students paying or feeling that they're paying, well, they are, for their education, that they have more of a voice. I like to think in Scotland we did that some time ago because I don't view our students as clients or customers. I do view them as customers sometimes, but mostly as partners with us in their learning. And so the student voice is really rising, I think, in universities, and I think that's a good thing. And I just thought I'd ask you 2 questions, because one of the bases of student success is students engaging if they engage with their learning and with their institutions, then they tend to be successful. And I just wondered if I'd ask you, what percentage of students do you think of leaving university?
You mean leaving their course?
Leaving university, their course completely. 20? 30? 60. Well, we had to do the spectrum. It's between 33 and about 43%. Well, that was in a study done by Liz Thomas, which is really quite a high percentage, I think. You know, if you say averaging, yeah, about 38%. And when do they actually leave university? When do you think is the worst time, or when most of them leave university? Yeah, just after Christmas or in the first semester. That is the time that they leave university. And when you ask them, the top three that are in bold and italics are the top. There's nearly always more than one reason, and the top three are the most reasons that they cite most frequently. The demands of academic studies, so their expectations were maybe of a different level, a different pace, a different environment. So the demands being too tough. Feelings of isolation and lack of inclusion in community. So particularly if you think of school leavers coming from classes of 30 and suddenly they might be sitting in a class of 500. And concern about achievement of their future aspirations, which is, you know, they had a vision of being, I don't know, highly successful, driving around in a smart car or something, and now it's really tough, and they're concerned about that. There are other things, the wrong course, funding and cost of living, but those three came out as absolutely the top three that appeared. And this was a study done by Professor Liz Thomas on student retention and success, published in 2012 and funded by the Paul Hamlin Foundation. And what she also said, that the key times that are difficult for students are these times around transitions. And we often think of transition as just being transition into university, but there are many more transitions for students that are really challenging for them. So it might be that they decide to change university. It might be that they want to go on a placement, and that's challenging for them, study abroad. They may change into employment. That is a transition, or into postgraduate study. And a transition that sometimes people overlook is that kind of, certainly in the Scottish system, that transition between honours years and the first 2 years. We have many students who come to us from college. It's a very different environment, and that is a key time of stress and challenge for many of our students. And what all the evidence over many years has suggested is that effective transitions promote student engagement. And if you can get students engaged, you will keep hold of them in a positive way, and that leads to student success. I think this is a lovely quote from Goodenow in 1993 about creating a sense of belonging for our students as being hugely important to making them feel a part of a scholarly community. So they're there in a community. They're not at school anymore. They're there or wherever. They're in a community of scholars. They may be junior scholars or scholars with their L plates on, but they're in this community. Students' sense of being accepted, valued, included, and encouraged by others in the academic classroom setting, and of feeling oneself to be an important part of the life and activity of the class. It's more than just liking or warmth. It also involves support and respect for personal autonomy and for the student as an individual. So back in 1993, the whole concept of personalization was there in terms of making people feel, our students, that they are individuals. And so if you look at the whole gambit of what, there are many, many ways, and I'm not going to go into any of them, well described by Liz Thomas and by many others about how you create that sense of belonging. But if you do create a strong sense of belonging for students, and the best place to do that is not in Freshers' Week, in the X Society or the Y Society. It's around the classroom. It's around the academic activity. It's around activities that have academic value. If you can create it there, and then you give them a high quality learning and teaching experience, students will be successful. and you will retain them and they will be successful. And I think all the evidence points to that. The question is how we do that, individualizing that sense to make it feel individual for every student that comes in. But even if you just think of that about creating community, belonging, engaging with students, the role of IT&S is pretty obvious, I think, for the future, in terms of how we can use information technology to communicate, to build communities, to make people connect, to integrate. And the explosion in the use of social media. I read somewhere recently, I don't know if it's true, that something like 40% of the world's population, 2.7 billion people, were accessing social media. I have to say I'm one who doesn't, but it's just absolutely phenomenal. Certainly the younger generation, but actually the fastest growing accessors of social media appear to be those over, I think it was over 50. They're used to it, and gradually as years go on, people use this to connect, to feel part of a community. So there's a huge role, I think, there around how we use social media, connect communities of students. We have started to integrate online materials within and online approaches to teaching within our learning, within the classroom and within our learning style, learning systems, if you like. Certainly at Edinburgh Napier, we've made a lot of investment over the last 2 years in developing the platforms. So we have really good, high-quality, integrated multimedia into our platforms so that we can give a good and interactive experience to our students. And I think using more of that in a hybrid approach where the classroom becomes something different, but using and also connecting students that may be not able to access the classroom to create and build that sense of belonging and community around academic activities. In terms of the role of IT in the future, I hear my colleagues in Edinburgh Napier, David and colleagues, talking about how you might use more information about how students make their choices. So I guess it's about learning analytics and data-driven learning and assessment and support. So where we're using data to actually identify students who are struggling. I think many of us will have done that, because we know that students leave. If they leave early on. So monitoring attendance, using that data to identify at-risk students. Many of us are doing. We can go well beyond that in terms of students' grades, looking at the kinds of support students are accessing. There are undoubtedly ethical issues around how you use the data, but I do think that offers us lots of opportunities to personalize the support we can provide for students, particularly during transition. And ultimately, I think online learning will continue to grow, certainly compared to the online learning I kind of looked at 5 or 6 years ago, and what is available now. I believe it's really a viable alternative. And so the growth of online learning, IT can support that. Well, obviously, IT can really make that a truly viable alternative, which can help in many ways address lots of issues, including widening access. In terms of learning and research, I've mentioned really that with the student success, I've talked about student diversity, meeting their expectations and employability. What I wanted just to touch on were the way that IT, the challenges we have in research. Every university probably in their strategy may have somewhere, or many universities, the grand challenges, the issues over sustainability, over aging societies, various challenges that we need teams of people connected and large data to actually progress the research further. There's a real drive, and rightly so, to open access of research material, to try and open up data to make it much more accessible to the public, etc., and to linking partners so that they can work on data together. And certainly the work that's done, say, at CERN is a really, really good example of how huge communities of researchers can be brought together through the support of IT to actually make impressive steps forward in research. And so for me, how IT can enable those environments, I mentioned around learning, creating communities of practice, supporting collaborative learning, and sharing information of students. I think that's a really, really valuable role, and I hope will become more prevalent in the future. I think looking forward, how students can use information technology to hopefully take part as creators of their own curriculum. We're looking much more at one of the strategic objectives in our strategy is about changing all of our classroom experiences from being didactic, not all of them, 90% of them, because sometimes the lecturers are really good at just getting over a framework for learning for maybe a module or something, but changing that to making the classroom, the flipped classroom as it were, much more interactive, much more useful. But that it may involve also the students as being co-creators of their curriculum, of choosing how they build their curriculum. And I think undoubtedly the role of IT is very strong in supporting that and in helping students become more innovative. Because of that government agenda around innovation and linking universities to business, I mean, the greatest, perhaps, contribution we make to innovation is through our graduates, all the graduates we produce every year. And so there's a big focus, I think, will become increasingly on our graduates as entrepreneurs, as enterprising, as innovative individuals, and how we can support them to do that. I believe technology has a role. I mentioned research, the global challenges, breaking boundaries, connecting people, and how we manage to use big data effectively. So I believe information technology is a catalyst for innovation in all of these areas. Internationalization, this is something that we're considering at the moment because of how we do it, teaching 5,000 students in other countries. And how do we make them feel part of a bigger community? It's very difficult, and I don't think we do it as well as we could. How do we give our students in Edinburgh the benefit of being part of a community that includes Chinese students, Singaporean students, Indian students? How wonderful would that be if they could all come together? And the way they can mostly come together is in online and virtual environments. So all of us, I think, universities in the UK certainly, and beyond, are defining our ambition in global terms. We certainly are. We want to be renowned internationally because I think we do a great job internationally. We teach and produce highly employable graduates who do really, really well in their career paths. So we want to be known for that. We're all looking at how we deliver overseas, transnational education, but the things that are bothering certainly our staff are the student experience, making sure the curriculum is relevant to where you're teaching, while being making sure that students in Edinburgh, as I say, can have the benefits of looking at different types of curriculum. We're looking at how we can work with partners. So, for example, we have a very good research group around sustainable construction, around how you insulate houses, make them more soundproof, etc. This is a real issue in some parts of the world, and we're seeking how can we connect each other effectively without always relying on face-to-face engagements. And of course, we all want to keep connected to our alumni. For lots of reasons, many people think it's just about raising funds, which is a smaller part of the role I believe alumni. Firstly, I believe they can, when they speak well of your university, when they tell others about what they experienced and where they've been, it really helps your brand and your reputation. But more importantly, it's about using them to help future graduates get on, to give them perhaps mentoring, to support them in some way so that our graduates can be part of a worldwide network which will help them in their careers in the future. And in terms of the role of information technology in supporting that, again, it helps us make connections, it helps us engage. I bet there's no one person in this room who hasn't been asked to upgrade their website recently because we use so much technology in terms of marketing. But for me, and a lot of what I've come back to is, or speak about, is building different communities of people, different communities of practice, and that is where I see IT really supporting us. But as well as developments in what we do, I think many of us, Luke mentioned restructuring, and there are many comments about restructuring, how organizations have restructured over the years. I do think there is a role in helping develop how we organize. Certainly viewing end-to-end processes, how IT support the efficiency of processes is really critical. It can enable organizational structures. We can able to flatten the structures, which is something that I feel quite strongly about within my own organization, that we flatter structures that are faster, more flexible, and decisions get made on a quicker basis. And so a lot of, I noticed when wandering around the exhibition, a lot of people looking, well, demonstrating analytical tools to improve decision making. All of us are looking at our business intelligence systems. So again, within organizational development, I see technology as a catalyst for both innovation and for communication. And finally, to just pick up something about staff engagement, because we can all have great strategies and we can all have lots of ideas and thoughts. When you work in a higher university setting, there are always loads of ideas. That's what's so invigorating about it. There are people who have wonderful thoughts and ideas, and they're always flourishing up. But it's about motivating staff to adopt, to deliver on those on the goals. That's really important. And maybe you will have a much stronger feel on the current population of academic staff in the UK. What is the skill base around digital technologies? What is the gap? Because it seems to me to be patchy in my organisation, and the organisation I'm in now, I believe, is much more advanced than places I have worked previously. So I think that's a real challenge about the staff skill base, and consequently we need to put some effort into training and development, and I suspect that is the case in many organisations. I think also it's important for us to align our recognition and reward systems against those things that we value, the skill bases and the delivery that we value. So if in my organisation we have this goal that we want an excellent personalised student experience, and we've identified what that would be, then the reward and recognition systems for all staff should reward people who have made a real effort to create these, to personalise the experience for students, to make their classrooms interactive or whatever. So I think alignment of recognition and reward systems is really important. And I think a role for IT and S leadership is, in my view as someone who is not in IT and IS, is about opening staff eyes and engaging with them to the possibilities. It's about the opening their eyes to the transformative potential of digital environments, how people can access information, but connect people, build community, and really open their eyes to that. Because I think once you open the possibilities of what IT can do for teaching, for student success, for research, you're talking in the language that, rather than talking in the IT language, we're talking in the language that academic staff engage with. Something I did want to just to mention was that customer-client service. I mentioned earlier I don't consider our students customers and clients, but sometimes they are, but not all the time. But all our services and universities have to put who we define as the customer or the client at their heart, and that includes staff, students, alumni, whoever that it might be. It's about making sure that there is an end-to-end approach to the service, and that staff, whoever your clients are not left adrift in the middle of a chain of events where they're trying to access a particular service. And I suppose I see our services as shifting from being a responsive resource. So students, if they come into the student hub or they go to the library or they go to the IT desk where their request is responded to, as moving into being proactive about identifying the things that students and staff need, and being proactive in delivering those. And that, I think, is very important for any service. So just to come back to where I started around strategy, to me, in terms of transforming institutional practice and achieving goals, the strategic framework is absolutely necessary. It's the glue that gives activities and interventions a purpose. It defines our shared ambition for us in Edinburgh Napier around and set on a platform of shared values. And it's a framework for action as well as for resource allocation. And so the things that we've said we're going to do are the things that are going to have priority in terms of investment. And if I just pick up in terms of going back to our strategy, if I look at our strategy map and I think, what about the role of information technology and services? Well, it's underpinning everything. And so David and his colleagues are going to be run off their feet because it's very much an enabler of everything we do. If I pull out something around active learning in our building our academic reputation, we have to have the technology-enabled lecture theatres, rooms, seminars, and the open resources we need to make that happen for our students. If I pick anything out of internationalising our work, where we plan to double our delivery of overseas students, of education overseas, we have to be able to build those communities through IT and online platforms. If I look at delivering a personalised student experience, we have invest in learning, and we have our learning and social spaces. We have our students thinking about what could we do with video walls and networked collaborative stations and things like that. So every single thing I pick out in terms of our strategy, information technology is underpinning that to make us deliver it effectively. So I thought I'd just end with who do we think we are, and I suppose I thought of all of you in this room as really being a breed of a kind of transformer. I think that the possibilities are phenomenal and endless, but I'm sure I don't know a tenth of all the possibilities that you know. And I think it's up to you in your institutions to surface those, to open up our colleagues, everybody, to open up staff and student eyes to the possibility of IT to support whatever your strategic objectives are. They will be different from ours, certainly in the detail. I think it can enable, drive, I think it can accelerate change and introduce step changes. It can enable better research and learning and better support for staff and students. I think it's tough because I think you've got, as IT colleagues, you have many, many stakeholders within the institution, let alone out with the institution, and engaging with different stakeholders and bringing them all to the same place is hard, to get everybody to sign up. But I do believe that leadership in IT is hugely important for the success of our universities and for the success in Edinburgh Napier of our delivering our strategy. And so I like to think of you as having IT and the people in this room of having a transformative role in shaping universities into the future. That's all I want to say. I'm happy to take any questions.
Hello, I'm John Beaver from the University of Bath. Thank you, that was a really
Sorry,
John Beaver from the University of Bath. Thank you, that was a really interesting presentation. You talked about the relative lack of disruption in HE.
Maybe I'm wrong.
No, I think you're right. Relevant to other areas. And you also talked about us as the transformative nature that IT could potentially provide. Or disruption would be the other way of saying that. How much disruption or how much appetite for disruption do you think our academic colleagues actually have?
It's an interesting question. I think if the vision is compelling, I think if the goal is compelling, you get most people to shift. I really do believe that. I believe, I think you can excite them if the goal is compelling. Now, that's not to say it would be an easy journey. But I do believe it's about painting the picture and showing the possibilities in the language of students, teaching, research.
Hi there. One of the things that you displayed today was a fear of IT. Okay? And that is really common across all areas. And so as an IT professional, one of the things we struggle to do is make what we're offering, and I think you've touched on it, this communication in the business language, make what we're offering easy to understand for other people. So do you have any tips of how we can do that? Because making a case for investment in certain things to people who have no understanding of what you're talking about is really difficult to do, and it would be useful to know if there's certain things we need to say or do to make that easier.
I think it depends on the particular thing, but if someone comes, I'm just trying to think what we've agreed investment for or something. I think it's kind of the same. It is the language, Heidi. It's the language of making it clear what we can achieve. And I think often using examples for how similar technology has helped other industries or sectors or whatever. And I know we always say we're unique, but we're not that unique. It is about stripping it away to the bare essentials. I personally am someone who learns through experience and through seeing and through doing. And so I'm always completely won over by somebody who shows me something. I think, wow, that can really make a difference to me. And I can see how it can make a difference to my students.
So show examples.
Well, that's my style of showing and seeing and doing.
Andrea, it's David. So obviously I'm up the back here. And clearly I'm not going to criticise anything that you've said, given that you're the boss. But I think that it's interesting that you link your experience with the type of leadership, the compelling story. And something that we've got to take on is that leadership can take many forms. So you can lead from the front and build a compelling story, but as leaders we need to get in there and collaborate with our academic colleagues. We've got to show them and hold their hand, and we've got to learn from them, and then both of us move forward together, because if we don't do that, we're not going to have the real success that we're looking for. So it's about being able to be adaptive and deliver leadership at different levels, from the compelling vision right through to the underpinning collaboration and being in there with our colleagues right across the university.
And I'm a great believer too. I know we talked about, you mentioned major disruption, but I'm a great believer, again, personal experience, of little wins being very, very useful for building trust. So for me, and you're right, I do have a slight fear of technology. I use it all the time. But when I came to Napier, was how technology helped me reach huge numbers of staff about our strategy on an ongoing basis, doing things I'd never done before. And I thought, okay, well, we'll give it a go. I feel wonderful because A, it worked, and B, the staff all kept emailing me saying, we really like this, we really think that worked. So that little win, personally, has made me very much more engaged with how we develop that way of communicating with colleagues, not just for me, but for everybody across the organisation. So I think little wins and little steps make a big difference. They build trust and a relationship.
Andrea, Luke Taylor. I think the vision that you've presented, I think, is quite compelling, and but involves a huge amount of change. So both at the sort of technology level, at the physical level in terms of changing our learning environments, and at the skills level in terms of a lot of the staff. And in order to for the UK to remain sort of competitive with its standing and its reputation in terms of higher education in the current funding environment, seems like it's quite a challenge to be able to deliver that quickly. And I just wondered if what your thoughts were about how to tackle that tension between challenging funding environment and the need to be able to change the organisation at a pace in order to compete with other universities abroad.
I mean, I suppose that there's no quick solutions and there's no easy answers. I don't think we should be in any way downhearted or feel slightly defeated by the appearance of it having to be so fast. We offer our students a really good experience. We do good research. So I know we have to do things differently to stay competitive. But we are in the vanguard as a higher education sector, and I think we should be proud of that. We don't have the funding to do all we want. We don't have, actually, even if we had all the money in the world, we couldn't just change our with the staff development that would be required and the whole pedagogic shift. We just couldn't do it. So I don't potentially see funding as the blocker that some might do. I think certainly around the student experience, working in partnership with students is really, really important. I think bringing the student community along with us to engage them in that journey will make it easier. And so you just have to, cut your cloth to suit you, whatever. So I'm not answering any solutions at all. You have the funding you have. We're all trying to raise more income to do better, to invest in the function of the university. And we just have to do what we can. But I think one of the biggest things is the staff engagement and having staff on your side. I think amazing things can happen when the staff think, yep, we're going to do this.
Ian Liddell, Brunel University, London.
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
Ian Liddell from Brunel University, London. I was very pleased to hear you talking about risk and risk analysis. Risk is what we have to do. And we see it every day in our academic colleagues. Research is risk. Putting on new courses is risk. You talked about managerialism. I think what we fear more than the managerialism is the corporatism. The corporatism that brings us a risk-averse view of the services that are provided. And I'd like to see everyone in the universities talking to our councils, our governing bodies, about allowing more risk than the auditors will allow for us.
Are you talking specifically around IT?
Around IT, yeah. Yes. It's one of the more risk-averse areas to the finance officers and the like, the auditors.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky balance, isn't it? Managing risk. I must confess, from our own audit processes, I have seen that come through around the IT, so I recognise, I don't know how to solve it, but I recognise what you're saying. I think you've made a good point about we've just set up a working group a shared executive working group with our university governing body, which is a court in Scotland, around what is the risk appetite for the work we're going to do internationally. Let's just get the ground rules now so that we're all understanding the risk framework for the work we do internationally. And perhaps we should do much more of that around other areas. We have, as every university will have, a risk register and our top risks, but they often tend to be at a very, very high level, and actually the kinds of risk aversion you're talking about is not talked about as often. I don't have an answer, but I think your point is well made.
Okay, if we can thank Andrea once more for her very good presentation. Okay, we've now got a break.